Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out about what we do. Our guest today, Kevin, is helping change the affordable housing economy one lot at a time. So I thought that was really fitting with our podcast. He was telling me that before the show. He's been in real estate developing for over 15 years, but what they're doing now has been the last 5 years. And they're really trying to help solve the housing crisis that's in the States. And they're out of Texas right now, but I know they're planning on expanding everywhere. There were 5,300 projects in works just within Texas, which is pretty cool. So, hey, welcome to the show, Kevin. And tell us, like you were telling a little bit before, tell us a little bit about your mission and what you're doing, because it was really intriguing and I don't want to butcher it.
Sure, Angela, thank you. We are trying to solve the affordable housing crisis, one lot at a time, one family at a time. What we build is five-star, fully amenitized manufactured housing communities. But in its essence, what we're building are just communities with homes in them. We've had to alter the traditional strategy of build on your lot that most home builders use so that we can drive the affordability much higher within our communities versus kind of that standard site built, stick built, single family home. And so we do that by renting the lot to a homeowner and the homes being built in a factory instead of being built on site.
Awesome. And what got you into that? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey and what started you down this path.
Yeah, so it's a non-traditional path, but a lot of people that get into real estate have a non-traditional path. So I had the opportunity to go play Big Ten football at Northwestern. Tell people I majored in football and minored in mechanical engineering, but as a kid, always wanted to design vehicles. And my dad and I started a custom vehicle manufacturing company out of college. But he had also bought mobile home and RV parks after selling his oil field business. And to him, starting a business together meant that I was involved with all of the family businesses. And so directly out of college, and even before I graduated, I was doing repairs on mobile homes and tenant relations and evictions and all of the fun things you get to do in kind of that tenant landlord rental housing situation. And long story short, he passed away in 2015, and I took over all the family businesses. And in 2018, my brother-in-law and I got together, founded K8H Ventures. My name's Kevin, his name's Harry. So we are the K and the H of K8H Ventures. And from there, I actually tried to expand and buy more manufactured housing communities. What we had owned previously are 2 and 3 star communities. We call those mobile home parks, and if they get bad, trailer parks. And what we wanted was manufactured housing communities, 4 and 5 star communities, places that provide a better standard of living to the resident. And in turn, when you provide that better standard of living, you tend to get a higher quality tenant as well. And we had seen everything that, the trailer park, mobile home park world can throw at you. And wanted to get out of that by providing real community, thriving communities. And so what we found in 2018 as we built a big off-market database was that the institutions, the publicly traded REITs, Sun Communities, UMH, Equity Lifestyles, and then a lot of life insurance companies love manufactured housing communities as well, is that because no new supply had been built since the 70s, the existing communities were being bought up, and the final of those that weren't owned by institutions were being bought by institutions in 2018. And so we couldn't compete on pricing. They were at sub 3.5 caps, and we needed 8.5 caps at that point to make any money in a retail syndication. And so we looked at development, and in 2020 broke ground on the first all-age institutional quality manufactured housing community in Texas since the 70s. And took us a year to convince banks and investors that we could build this product type because it hadn't been done in 50 years. And we got 6 months into the construction of that project, and Sun Communities, one of those big publicly traded REITs, called and said, "We want to buy this." After a lot of no's, they put enough zeros on the check that we had to take it as a fiduciary to our investors. Ended up providing a 3.25 multiple to our investors in 22 months. But in that process, we were under contract for just over a year with Sun Communities. They said, we want to buy entitled land, which is shovel ready essentially, or fully stabilized, so a fully operating community. And so we went out and bought a bunch of land to entitle for Sun Communities and other institutional buyers. And as soon as interest rates went up, all of our buyers backed out. We had all of our properties under contract. And so we kind of took the wheel and said, we're going to develop these and operate these ourselves. We felt then, and we feel even more so, that no one can operate these communities as well as we can, because no one else is going to care about the tenant as much as we do. It's just part of the mission we have. Our property management team internally is called our hospitality team. And so we've put a lot of time and effort and money into ensuring that these are big, beautiful communities, and providing the infrastructure tools for our hospitality team to really make sure that they're thriving communities for years. Believe it or not, that was the short version. So,
That's awesome. So what are some of the obstacles you've had to overcome to get to where you are, and what would be some tangible things that people could do the same to get, become successful in whatever ventures that they're doing?
yeah, so I think it all comes down to personal and organizational discipline. And I'll kind of come back to that, but the biggest obstacle that any developer is going to face is whether or not that product type is desired within a community. And for the most part, people only see mobile home park or trailer park as what's being permitted to be built in their community. And their vision of that is the old trailer parks from, 8 Mile and all of these movies depicting manufactured housing living as trailer trash. And that's not what we're building. And so we've built renderings and websites and things to show people what our product really is. And that has began to sway hearts and minds. But we get a lot of what's called NIMBYism, not in my backyard, from the county commissioners, from zoning boards, from local neighbors. And so most of the opposition we face is really an educational challenge for us to educate people on what our product type is. And then back to the personal and organizational discipline in 2020, when we broke ground on, or right before we broke ground on that first project, I was 60 pounds heavier. I was drinking a lot more, and we were pregnant with our sixth kid. And I realized that in order to run an organization that can do the things that we were aspiring to do, I needed to kind of have that Andy Frisella makeover. And I did the 75 hard program. I've done it 4 or 5 times now. Developed my own program to where I'm 365 days a year on a program. And it's ensured that I'm living what I define as my perfect life 365 days a year. And by doing that, and first instituting discipline on myself, I could then institute discipline on our organization. And it's driven efficiency, it's driven quality, both in the quality of our communities and quality of our communication and operations and everything internally as well.
That's awesome. When did you get introduced to Andy, and how? Curious.
So or actually the owner of the general contracting company we used on that first development introduced me to it in 2019. And it was before the Real AF rebrand. So I went back and listened to a lot of the MFCEO podcasts. And I had, since coming out of school, I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I spent 12 months in 2012, actually the whole calendar year of 2012, taking my salary off the books of the manufacturing company we had and working on that in the evenings and working an engineering job during the day. And I hated the corporate politics and all the things that come along with, having to follow other people's directions. And so I learned a lot in those 12 months of how not to run an organization more so than how to run one.
Hmm.
But from 2009, when I graduated, I had been listening to entrepreneurship podcasts, and when I found Andy, it was like, all right, kindred spirit, um, tells it like it is, and when I had heard about 75 hard, obviously throughout that process, but didn't hit a point in life to where um, I knew I needed to make a big change like 75 hard provides until 2020.
And then you started it, and what were some of the obstacles? Did you pass your first go, or did you have to restart? And how did you get through it, and how did you mentally play the game?
Yeah, so I did make it through the first time, though um, I don't recall if it was done 100% the right way, because I failed a couple times after that. And then, the two or three subsequent times that I've done it has been very by the book as it should be. And, I see a journey of discipline very similar to a journey in faith or a journey in practicing a skill, learning a skill, is that there's ebbs and flows. And, a lot of people can assume a hockey stick growth because they see you 2 years later, but it's not that. It's the up, two steps forward, one step back, three steps forward, five steps back, constantly, but putting a trend line that is linear or hockey stick um, provides the protection, the downside protection, if you will, when you do fall through those things, that you can get back up and keep going. So the obstacles in trying to build essentially a new asset class, manufactured housing that was built of old, um, is really a lower quality asset type than what we're building now, for a couple different reasons, technology wise, on the infrastructure and everything that we're building, but also the technology of the homes themselves, which we don't build. We partner with different manufacturers on that, but these homes now are incredible. They are, and I actually have a representative from one of the big home builders, top two home builder, told me straight out that what's coming out of the factory is of better quality than what they're building. And a lot of that is because now you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and fix everything in these homes. They're, 2x6 walls, uh, 16 on center, everything that you would find in a standard home is now being built in these manufactured homes. And so the longevity of the home is increased, the durability of the home is increased, the aesthetics of the home has been increased. And what hasn't been provided are communities to put these homes in until now. And so by building a new asset class, the headwinds are tremendous. The economic tailwinds we have are also tremendous. And so we're kind of getting squeezed in this middle ground of, we have these properties ready to develop, capital markets in a down market with interest rate fluctuations. All of those difficulties kind of all can't have come to a head in the last year. And without the discipline of 75 hard, plus my own, I call it the TBVOM app, the best version of me, is the app that I built and used to track my daily progress. But without that discipline, there's no way myself personally as the CEO or our organization could have flourished in the environment we're in now, where we're beginning to construct, multiple properties at a time.
So when you got out of high school, you wanted to be an entrepreneur. Was there a reason you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Or was that was your parents an entrepreneur? Where did that desire come from?
So my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I kind of learned it from him. We always had a pretty good life. I was blessed to have two parents that loved me. Grew up not really needing much. My dad always said, especially as I began to get scholarship offers for football, that was my job. And so I didn't have to work through high school. I didn't have the Gary Vaynerchuk, I was selling early on in my life, trying to make money and hustle early in life. It really comes down to, I'm not great at following directions I don't agree with. And so that's what really pushed me towards entrepreneurship, is that I like to create a plan, design that plan, and execute that plan. I got a minor in design engineering, and so the idea of designing something and then watching it be built is really exciting for me. And that, whether that's our communities or each of our operating companies, or how do we amend a development budget to be able to hit the return profiles that we look for. You know, do we do asphalt roads instead of concrete? Do we bring in a smaller clubhouse for the first phase of development? Because that's the other piece of this, is all of our developments are large when compared to other manufactured housing communities, but they're on par with other single family developments. And so our smallest community is 365 lots, and our biggest are just over 1,000. And so we know the need for this product type, and so we're not hesitant to build bigger communities. But I got off track there a little bit.
So I think a lot of people are listening to this, and at least myself, and I'm like, well, this is great. You got lots going on. What are some of what I'm trying to get to is, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome them? Were there days that, people said no? Was there days that you were broke? Was there days you're knocking on doors? What were some of the struggles? Because that's, a lot of people are listening to this podcast and they're not building 1,000 people communities. They're like just starting out and they're in the hustle and grind. So I want you to go back to the hustle and grind. What is it that caused you to get to the point of building 1,000 place communities? Because that's a big deal. So where did you start out and how did you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I mean, as we scale, we're going to continue to hit different periods where we feel like we're broke. Just this week, we're still figuring out where payroll's coming from. And that's because we're allocating a ton of capital into these new developments. Mm-hmm. And if we're not pushing, then we're never going to hit those issues, but we're also not going to make the impact that we want to make. And so there's plenty of times that we feel broke. In fact,
so when you go back, Kevin, sorry to interrupt, but when you go back, I want you to go back 25 years when you started to be an entrepreneur. What is it that started the momentum? Were you knocking on doors? Were you cold calling people? And how many times did people tell you this was a silly move? Did anyone tell you that, or everyone said, this is just an easy ride? Kind of just going back to that is what I'm curious about.
Yeah. So my first day of work was January 1, 2009. Left my cleats on the field after playing Missouri in the Alamo Bowl in December of 2008. Because early on I was backed by my dad, who had sold his oil field company, and in my view at that point had the capital to have as much runway as we needed, but felt at the same time very personally responsible for the success of that particular business. And so it's a ton of cold calling. This is really, Facebook was there, but the idea of doing a ton of Facebook marketing or how to do it was less available. Mm-hmm. And so we did it more the old school way, where we picked up the phone and called people, sent emails. Email was our primary marketing strategy. Long story short, the company started out as a custom tailgate company. And so we build tailgate rigs for people going to football games mostly. And in January 2008, there weren't a lot of people spending their extra income on tailgating. And so we had to pivot several times because we saw no real need in the market. So we went to fire, emergency response, marketing, and tried to pivot over and over again. The final pivot was trying to build food trucks. And so we built a food truck park in front of our manufacturing facility to try to drive more food truck traffic. And what ended up happening, this was right after my dad passed, what ended up happening was we kept the bar and food truck park and had to sell the manufacturing facility because of budgeting issues on both sides, the build of the food truck park and the build time cash flow issues of the manufacturing facility. So we sold that, and again, being blessed to jump into entrepreneurship with some amount of cash flow from especially the mobile home and RV park stuff that my dad had built. But what I had come to find out that I didn't know before he passed is that, a year or two uh, down the same path that he was on, and bankruptcy was probably in the cards. And so when he passed, we sold their vineyard in California, we sold the manufacturing facility, we sold two of the mobile home and RV parks, really got our heads back above water. And there's been plenty of times where um, I either didn't take a paycheck or had to defer a paycheck or I didn't know if I was going to get one. And so building a family in that time period, um, where my wife comes from a very conservative dairy farming family and telling her we might not get a paycheck this month is always a fun conversation. Um, and that's the struggle that most entrepreneurs go through. I've got a good friend who's transitioning to his own insurance agency, but he's been in it for 15 years and he's like, oh, I'm already making money and I'm 2 months in. But from the people that start from scratch, especially from day one out of school, whether high school or college, there tends to be that first 10 years punch in the mouth period. And because we pivoted only 5 years ago to go from operating existing communities to developing new communities, I anticipate another 5 years being punched in the mouth before we feel like we can take a deep breath.
So, listening to you, a lot of people, they're like, this sounds great because where you're at, for instance, they're like, yeah, that sounds good and they want that, but they're not willing to go through what you went through to get where you're at. What gave you the self-belief, if you can think about it? Because I can tell, like, you have self-belief in yourself in spades. And I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs do, self-confidence, self-belief, whatever you want to call it. Where do you think that came from? I mean, obviously you talked about your dad being a big part, but I mean, a lot of people have dads that are big parts and they still don't necessarily have it. What have you done to help grow your self-belief and self-confidence in you that you can actually do this on the hard days and you haven't thrown in the towel and said, you know what, screw it, I'll just go work for someone and get a steady paycheck, la-di-da, if you can think of that.
Yeah, I'm a very left-brain person, very logical, hence the engineering degree. And, I think it's a mix of solving puzzles with discipline to feel that I've looked at all the variables. I can somewhat predict the future based on historical norms, plus the reps, plus the discipline. Uh, so I guess discipline, reps, and logic for me would be the formula there. Um, the discipline to know that I can do the work no matter how I feel. I get made fun of by my wife that I'm a big baby when I'm sick, and I'll sit in front of my computer, leaned back with my eyes closed, typing to try to get work done when I feel bad. But as soon as I go home, I'm out. Sorry, baby, you get to take care of me at that point. The logic piece, being able when Harry, my brother-in-law and business partner, and I got back into real estate, really when we made that choice in 2018, I did an analysis of every real estate asset class and came up with manufactured housing, RV resort, and industrial as our three favorite. And we had 10 years of experience at that point in MH and RV. So that's what we went into. But industrial's the other fastest growing real estate asset class since. So my analysis was pretty dead on at that point. And we obviously couldn't foresee the pivot into development, but again, that just came from solving the puzzle of, we know that there's a need, people paying a lot for these communities once they're built and running. How do we get our foot in the door to own one of these? And it became a one foot after the other, trying to solve the puzzle of delivering affordable housing. And once we found development, we sold and are still in the process of selling some of our legacy communities that my dad had bought, and narrowly focusing on bringing affordable housing to as many people as possible, as fast as possible. So
Awesome. I love it. So, in wrapping up, I always have three final questions and then anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners. So, first and final question is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
Single word would be prayer. I've spent part of my 365-day program as compared to 75 hard is I drop the second workout and I add 45 minutes of quiet prayer. And that for me has been far more difficult to do on a daily basis than go
Just
out and
thinking
run
that.
for 45 minutes. And so part of it is spending time with Christ in quiet, with the Bible, with, you know, some sort of prayer. A lot of times I've got a separate desk over here that I'll sit at, get here at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'll just sit at
Wow.
and say, all right, Lord, it's up to you today. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to think about? Other times I've got so much on my mind and going that 45 minutes of prayer is like a counseling session of, you know, here's actually the direction you should go in. And for me, answered prayers often come in the form of opened and closed doors. You know, we go to try to pursue something and that door closes, and that can hurt and be discouraging. But from the perspective of that's just a door that closed, that's not where we should go. Let's keep pressing. Let's keep trying to find the open doors, and that's really what led us into development. So thankfully, I have some amount of awareness to take closed doors, closed opportunities, no's from people, and just say, that's just a closed door. We're going to go over here, try door number two. And so to me, to find your purpose, you have to know who you are. And for me, that's a child of God. And once you know who you are, what your skill set is, then you can ask for that direction and spend a lot of quiet time, both in prayer and in analysis of what that direction looks like.
Awesome. And a little bit of elaboration on the sentence, basically, but just pray. That's good. I love
Yeah.
that. Second question is, what's a favorite quote and why?
Um, to whom much is given, much is expected, is one of them. You know, Romans 5 is another where Paul talks about discipline and what that leads to. Um, I've got a pair of shoes my wife got me that has LFG on one shoe and FABL on the other, and it's let's go on one and uh, F average, be legendary on the other. And so, yeah, I want to give way more than I want my business to grow. I want the people here to be fulfilled, loving their job in a place that they feel like they're making an impact. And I want our tenants to feel seen and, you know, just feel like they're part of a community. And that's what drives me. It's not, you know, the valuation, assets under management, equity under management, none of that drives me. Obviously, that's what is the machine that gets us to that fulfillment, but it is what it is.
Awesome. And third and final question, what's one word or one sentence that you want on your gravestone?
Son, father, husband, or son, husband, father would probably do it all for me.
Awesome.
Son of the Most High, husband, luckiest guy in the world, married 15 years, have 6 kids. So if my kids turn out to make a great impact in the world, then I've done my job.
Awesome. So you run into someone in a coffee shop and, you know, they listen to this and, you know, they're going to try 75 hard. I think that's something, and talk about prayer and all that kind of stuff we talked about. What's something we didn't touch on that would be really tangible for our listeners?
If someone wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's part of setting goals, setting kind of that vision board, Andy talks about that. I've got a list of I am statements that I read pretty much every day. It's on the front of the app that I built. And it just says who I am. And more specifically, who I am. When I coach my team, I tell them pick a year X, a date X years in the future. So whatever big event for you that would be. For me, it's my oldest turning 18. And so, and then create a bunch of I am statements. Who is the perfect version of you that far away from now? And then you can come back, you know, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now, in the next quarter, what can I do to become that person and commit to do the work to become the best version of you. My biggest fear is that I get to heaven. I think Ed says this, I get to heaven and God shows me the man that I should have become. And what I had become was less than that. I've spent a lot of time in prayer since I think I first heard Ed say that. And it really is one of my biggest fears. And so understanding who I am, who the perfect version of me is as I understand it today, and then fighting towards that means that every other decision in life kind of stems from that.
Awesome. Well, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. If we go out there and change one life or one starfish at a time, together, we can change the world. We'll have all of Kevin's information in the show notes. Reach out to me if you have any questions, of course. Thanks so much for being on, Kevin.
Thank you.